So I should think we're all pretty familiar with the story by now. ArenaNet releases Guild Wars 2, it's all about fighting Zhaitan, and ultimately the personal story finale is completely botched. We don't really fight the dragon at all. It's very cinematic and pretty, yes, but all we do is press 2, or now 1 since the patch on a turret, and the dragon dies. There always seemed to be something wrong with the Zhaitan fight. For starters, we don't even see the guy die, he just falls from the tower. All the cinematics that they have in place seem to just be very cut loosely together, as if there could be entire phases of battles between them, when ultimately there weren't. What about the story with Zhaitan and his sword Caladbolg, Destiny's Edge, the Dragon Slayers hoping to redeem themselves after their failure against Kraukatorrik, who just sit idly by while you do the hard work, or rather, your turret does the hard work. There's even the mechanical stuff in the game too, like the existence of a point of interest far out at Zhaitan's tower you get no access to. In fact, a long time ago, mined from alpha clients, we did see a version of a raw explorable mode featuring the dragon's body. What about the initial trailer for the game that showed a giant dragon corpse that looked like the entrance of some kind of dungeon? Now, I'm not necessarily one to believe in the initial launch trailer for the game they would show the deceased body of the final boss, but then this model does look very similar to early concept art of Zhaitan, and it definitely looks the same as the thing we see on the map. So what happened, ArenaNet? Did NCSoft force your hand on a release date just too quickly? What exactly are we missing out on? Well, today I'm going to talk a whole bunch about the Fissure of WoE from Guild Wars 1. Trust me, it's related. So, hello everyone. This is a Terraria 3D video. I must be honest, I wasn't sure I was even going to make. I've known about this map since starting to do the Terraria 3D videos. This was one of the earliest ones that I'd heard about. That Shaman and I both found this thing, but we were unsure if we could really share this. At the time, we weren't even sure if showing off the map north of Queensdale would be okay with ArenaNet, let alone the Wizard's Tower one, let alone Fortune's Vale, but since there's been no comments, they seem totally okay. Let's have a look at what is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting maps out there. This comes at a time where most of us in the community are waiting with bated breath on what ArenaNet are planning for Heart of Thorns with hardcore content. And they say they're going to give us hardcore content. What I think we're looking at here, guys, could be just that. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think this is actually ever going to come in the game. This is to do with Zhaitan, this is to do with an Area of the Mist, this doesn't seem to have anything to do with the Heart of Thorns story, but it will show us what maybe they were planning on once upon a time. Even if it is only 5-man, it's certainly some kind of big instance revolving around Zhaitan's body, and perhaps some Fissure of WoE style stuff too. So, before we get into Terraria 3D itself, as with the other videos, I kind of want to show you guys a map that I made for myself. This is a map of Ore, a region map of Ore, as you can see. And over here, I've jumped in an entirely new map, a map that none of us have ever played on. Now, when you go into Terraria 3D, you can always tell where north is. It's always facing up. So all I did was I went into Terraria 3D on the older version, zoomed all the way out, and then took a screenshot, overlaid it, just as you saw I did on the previous video with the Wizard's Tower and everything lined up perfectly. This map doesn't line up as well as the others did, though, and there could be a very good reason for that. Though this may be situated in Ore, there's actually very good reason to believe it doesn't exist on Terraria at all. In fact, by the end of the video, I'm thinking that we're going to be much more convinced by the other interpretation than this one. But I did want to present this interpretation to you guys. There's a lot of very good reasons it could be here in Ore. The docking areas up in the top right here, they look very Orion, as we'll see when we get into the map in a second. And on this map is situated the corpse of a giant dragon, possibly Zhaitan. Yeah, so we'll see that very soon. And then proximity-wise, if Zhaitan died somewhere in Armour nearby, then yeah, he could have fallen on this map. Here's another version I tweeted out for you guys now that Terraria 3D has textures and stuff, so you can kind of see there. We got a little lava, which we'll talk about soon. But for this version, it could have been a map that had us fighting Zhaitan, finding the body at least, and then even having some kind of a progression into the Scavenger's Causeway, as you can see here. And we'll find a little bridge to that very soon. Alright, so all that said, let's get in and have a look. Now, for most of this video, we are going to be flying. I doubt we'll walk around like we did in other Terraria 3D maps. But I'm going to take you guys a little bit of a fly-through of what I believe is the kind of progression of the map, as it's a very complicated map, ultimately leading to, yeah, we'll do the money shot straight away, Zhaitan's body. Yes, this is a giant dragon head. Don't forget that this map doesn't show everything, so presumably there'd be a giant body back there going off the map. Maybe it doesn't have a collision, maybe Tyria 3D just doesn't have what it takes to be able to read the body, even though it would physically appear there, off in the distance, sprawling out outside of the map's bounds. But yeah, this is the dragon head. This is the dragon head we saw, the same model from the initial Guild Wars launch trailer, and this is finally how we were going to be able to explore it. There's a question that's going to be on a lot of our minds, though, which I kind of want to get out of the way with first. And that's, when did they design this map? Obviously, they were rushed at launch, right? And the Zhaitan map never ended up being a thing. Was this already in development when the game was at launch, and then they just decided it was unfinished, so they cut it and did something much more contracted, much shorter for the Zhaitan fight? Or was this something they started working on after the game came out, and they severely disappointed many of their players with a terrible boss fight at the end? You might remember, shortly after Guild Wars 2 came out, there was a quote in an interview from their developers saying they were working on, like, touching up the Zhaitan fight, and then nothing ended up coming of it. So was this their attempts at this point? Or was this always something that was going to be set after Zhaitan was already dead? So that body over there kind of makes it seem like this could be a map of when Zhaitan was already dead. But what I'm proposing, as you'll see from the structure of the map in a second, is that maybe we would progress through it, fighting the dragon. Obviously, he doesn't appear on the map here because he would be like a dynamic object. He'd actually be an enemy, right? Like, we don't see any enemies, we don't see any NPCs or things like that on these maps. And as we fight him, we go through multiple different sections of the map I'll take us through. And then ultimately, like, his body crashes down and we get teleported, a little bit like Fractals of the Mists, to a new location where we're like over in this valley region, and you see his body there, and maybe we go inside to like finally finish him off with Zhaitan, where he stabs his heart with Callid Bulg or something. In any case, it's very difficult to see where we could start. The map is pretty large, but it's also very barren. It's got a lot of small different walkways, and it actually reminds me a lot of elite endgame areas from Guild Wars 1, namely the Fissure of WoE. So, first we've got kind of this bone area here, and these like bone structures usually are gates and things. You can see in Straits of Devastation, for example, many places around, or where these bone walls are up, you would complete an event and eventually they'd recede. Seems like this is kind of a side area you would come to destroy this tower. Perhaps this tower is sieging people who are assaulting by sea. We've got obviously a big destroyed ship here, and this is some kind of Orion beach. Funny enough, this is one of the most Orion looking places in the entire map. These kind of spherical areas on these cliffs, they're much harder to see on the textured version of Tyria 3D, but these are incredibly Orion looking. You know, you got lots of these rings going on in the ore, and actually very quickly things aren't going to look too Orion after this area, which is interesting to me. And we are close to the Scavenger's Causeway, so if they ever did have some concept of finishing ore and then progressing deeper into that area of the map, as you can see here, maybe that's why we see the terrain change quite a lot. But I'm proposing that perhaps the mission would have started here. We would have been assaulting them by boat. We would have come along here. We would have landed on the beach. Maybe they would have had some D-Day style stuff they were thinking of. Maybe ideas that were never fully realized with Straits of Devastation that kind of had that idea going on as well. And then we progress. So over here on the left, we already have an option of a direction to go. I will go this way first. If you go off on the left, you will come to some kind of a large structure. Now, this looks obviously a lot like the garrisons we see. It's not quite the same as like the Queensdale garrison, or even necessarily World versus World forts. But it seems like this, again, would be some kind of offensive play, some other event, some location you have to capture. But as you'll notice, the map's actually kind of free roaming. It's kind of more open. Over here we can travel along, and we come to another area. Suddenly it's looking a lot greener. Suddenly, are these Orion trees? I can't even really tell, but it's looking a little bit more swampy. And we have a bunch of buildings here that look kind of pre-Searing-y. This place is really interesting to me because I think that this also could have been, with the teddy bear at the front, could have also been perhaps where we'd start. You'll notice we're crossing a river here. This river is actually, and this bridge specifically, is what takes us out of ore being over here, and into the Scavenger's Causeway. We've got some kind of willow tree here. And you'll be able to see that as we move out. Now, north is facing up here. The docks and stuff, the water is over in that direction. As you can see, they've actually got water on the map all the way along the right-hand side here, and out in that top corner up there too. Let's add the fog distance back up. Fog distance seems to move down. So, and then it comes all the way up there, as you could see in my placement of the map before. So this bridge, actually, as you can see the progression of the map, that bridge is taking us into the Scavenger's Causeway, if I'm correct with my speculation of where that should be placed. Which makes that a fairly an important location. So maybe this isn't the start. Maybe this is, in fact, where the map would end. You know, you would defeat Zhaitan, you'd finish everything off, and you'd come to this area for, like, some R&R, and that's why it looks so pretty and nice, and maybe this is where some semblance of a celebration would occur. Who knows? So anyway, that's not all we got. We've got the kind of tower structure over there. If we follow over on the left, now this I think is supposed to be kelp, or it's some kind of visual effect that gets bugged out in Tier 3D. You see this in a few places. It could be like a marker for where they would change the lighting of an area, and that's particularly interesting here because suddenly things start looking branded. Now, I'm not sure if this is really supposed to be Kraukatoric style branded areas, but it looks very much like that. It looks like the ground here is scarred in some way. Does that mean that there was going to be some action with Kraukatoric here in the final mission? I'm very hesitant to speculate that far, but it even culminates in this small little chamber over here. Really, I have very little idea. Shaman said maybe this was pointing towards the desert as well, because, you know, we're kind of in the Scavenger's Causeway and it goes along, but I'm not seeing it so much. It just seems like a very place-already random thing that they dropped in, and I'm not willing to speculate too much further on this. Things are complicated enough in a second, as you'll see. Moving along, we've got some fields, we've got some nice plants around here. Ultimately, we're going to swing around and we're going to kind of come into some cavey areas. And in this corner of the map, we see a tower. When I started seeing the towers on this map, my beliefs about what it was supposed to be, despite the Orion stuff, the clear Orion beach up there, despite the body of a dragon seeming so much like it was going to be a place in awe, the towers got me thinking. In Guild Wars 1, in the Fissure of WoE, there were two towers. There was the Tower of Strength and there was the Tower of Courage. And I kind of noticed that there seemed to be two towers on this map also. This is one of them, and specifically in the middle of this map is something pretty crazy. So let's put a pin in the idea that this is an ore for now. Let's go back to the beach and do another tour to a different place and think about something else. Okay, so here we are once again on the Orion Beach, the quite clearly Orion Beach. But let's not think of it this way. Let's instead think of ourselves as on the Fissure Shore. What is the Fissure Shore, you guys might ask? Well, the Fissure Shore was a location in the mists in the realm, the Fissure of WoE, Balthazar's realm, that we got to explore back during GW1. Now, ArenaNet's original concept for, like, hardcore endgame things in the first game, they released two massive maps. One was the Underworld, one was the Fissure of WoE. Both of them were set out in the mists, and both of them had us in very hostile environments. If our party of 8 died in these instances, we would be kicked out. There was no chance at resurrection. There were a whole bunch of quests in these large maps that you could do in largely any order you liked. They were kind of free roaming, much as we've seen this map is, and they offered various rewards. The Underworld eventually offered a lot of rewards in terms of ectoplasm, which was worth a lot of money, and culminated eventually in a giant boss fight against the enemy Doom. Well, the Fissure of WoE, Balthazar's realm, had something else going for it. In the very center of the Fissure of WoE was a forge. And if you stick with me, you're about to see that forge on this map. So let's not say this is all. Let's say we're on the Fissure Shore, one of the known locations from the Fissure of WoE. You can see in the image there. And what is north of the Fissure Shore? Well, there's two entrances, kind of. We got one on the left. Oh, like this entrance already took you guys up. And then there's another one, the Spider Cave. And what do we have here? Well, it looks very different. It obviously didn't look like ore in the first game, but we have another cave here, guys. And so if we move through this unreleased Guild Wars 2 map, we actually come into a long cave, much like the Spider Cave, that eventually takes us out with a choice. Do we want to go forward, and that would lead us to Zhaitan's body, we'll get to very soon, or we can go left into a giant structure, and this is where things get very cool. This, guys, now they're using assets from other things, like those are the Ebonhawk gates we're seeing here, for example, that they kind of have reused. But as we come into this central area, we find a pit of lava and a large forge. I'm going to drop the movement speed a little bit here. And a large forge suspended in mid-air above it with an image of one of the human gods, yeah, you guessed it, Balthazar, at north, east, south, and west at each point of the compass. We can see Balthazar right here. I'll throw an image up for you guys. This is absolutely him. This is what his statues looked like in the first game. And as we climb in the very center of this map, what do we find? We find an anvil. We find a giant forge. This is the Obsidian armor forge in the Temple of War, guys. So those of you who played GW1 will already be buzzing right now. For those of you out of the loop, though, this location was only unlocked after you completed a bunch of quests in this really difficult area of the game that would allow you to craft really, really, really expensive end game armor in GW1. It was purely cosmetic. It's basically the equivalent from the first game of legendary armor. So a lot of the time it didn't even look that great, but people would work really hard to be able to get this and kind of show off that they dedicated a lot of time to the game, and they'd ended up accruing a vast amount of wealth. And so it looks like ArenaNet at some point we're looking to add the Fissure of WoE, or at least the Temple of War and this forge, into Guild Wars 2. Was this an early concept for them to do legendary armor for us? So yeah, the forge is here. It's even got its own little stairway here. As you can see, we can walk up and you'll kind of spiral your way down, and then there's a way up. And this is quite clearly nothing else. This has to be the Eternal Forge. We've got the lava, we've got images of Balthazar, we've got a giant forge in the middle. And the geography kind of fits. We just came from the Spider Cave. Look at the map right now, guys. It leads basically directly into the Temple of War, which is what we're looking at right now with the forge at its heart. Even better than that, so there's two exits here. We'll up the movement speed once again. There's two exits to this area. One of them takes us north to the areas we already saw. And the other one comes back down south, as we can see here. That would be the Spider Cave. And over here, we come to some other familiar locations. This tower over here, this is the Tower of Strength. It doesn't match up exactly perfectly. This isn't exactly how the Fissure of WoE looks, but the Tower of Strength, this is a fiery mechanical tower just like what we saw in the first game. And the other tower on the other side of the map would be that garrison type place we were looking at. Maybe over here, when we were looking at the pre-searing style exit to the map, I was just saying could have been the Scavenger's Causeway. Maybe that wasn't that at all. Maybe this over here was the Forest of the Wailing Lord. As we look up, you can see there's quite clearly a river with a bridge. There's now two bridges leading over, and I believe there were some houses there also. Now, if you guys are more interested in the Fissure of WoE, you want to see these matchups for yourself, you can obviously play the first game. I do have a full tour as well on my channel of every quest that took place there, everything that happened with it, and there'll be a link to that in the description if you guys want to check it out. So it certainly seems like this is either a map for ore, or it's actually just the Mist, and this is a Guild Wars 2 version of the Fissure of WoE we're looking at. Pretty cool, right? But then it doesn't explain this one last thing. The dragon. Why is there a giant deceased? Let's drop out our move speed once again. We'll come into this area. This lava-y area we can see here. This was known as the Lake of Fire in the Fissure of WoE in the first game. Once again, we do have something of a Lake of Fire here. There's some crude means for us to pass across it. You've got these kind of bridges. But ultimately, in Guild Wars 2's Fissure of WoE, if that's what this is, it leads to a giant corpse of a dragon. Zhaitan's body, perhaps? An early version of Zhaitan's body before they changed the design and gave him all the crazy other stuff we see eventually. Who is this? Why is there a body here? Did when Zhaitan die, he go to the Mists, just like many other spirits go to the Mists, and this was where he ultimately was settled? Is this the closure that ArenaNet were going to give us? Maybe this wasn't a boss fight for him at all. Instead, we were just going to be able to get some kind of new endgame area. They were looking into it for a little while. They were maybe even going to give us legendary armor. And as closure to the Zhaitan story, we were going to have his body there on the map somewhere. I don't know. Or it could really be the instance. Maybe this could be a mix. Maybe this could be like Fractals of the Mist, in which, yeah, we're actually in ore over here, and we start, and we stage some kind of a fight. We end up killing Zhaitan. We get teleported into this little area here, the Lake of Fire style area. We come into his body with Trahearne and Caladbolg. This is where he was finally slain. You know, Trahearne stabs his heart, mists energy, and magic explodes everywhere and kind of teleports us, into the Fissure of WoE. And then at the end of the mission, we can craft some cool new, like, game armor for ourselves before finally moving off to the Scavenger's Causeway. It could be any mix of these things, but it is tantalizing indeed. That's pretty much all I can gather from the map, guys. I will be offering a chance, if you guys want to see any part of this map, like, more specifically, I'm very likely to do a video on my alternate channel. There'll also be a link down below. If you guys have got any requests of really specific stuff you want me to see, I'll do, like, more of a casual walkthrough. But so far, this is what I have deduced of the map. This is what I have seen and what I've managed to tell from it. I hope you enjoyed this crazy blend of a map. Who knows what ArenaNet were planning? And I think really the most interesting thing to take away from this is they actually have been looking into harder stuff. You know, there's nothing that necessarily says this is super endgamey content, but given what they're drawing their inspiration from with the Fissure of WoE, I wouldn't be surprised to hear it. And it's nice to know that the devs have been thinking about it, at least before Heart of Thorns. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, guys. This has been a fantastic fantastic thing to show you guys. I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to for a long time. Let me know if you enjoyed it. If you want to see a little bit more, also let me know. And let's hear your discussion, your speculation about what exactly is going on here. Love to hear it, guys. I guess I'll catch you next time.